December 26, 1996. 5:52 in the morning. Most of Boulder, Colorado is still wrapped in the quiet darkness of a post-Christmas sleep. But inside one mansion on 15th Street, panic is about to shatter that silence forever. Patsy Ramsey's trembling fingers punch 911 into the phone. Her voice cracks through the line, high-pitched, desperate, bordering on hysteria. Her 6-year-old daughter JonBenét is gone. Vanished from her bedroom. And on the spiral staircase leading down to the kitchen, 3 pages of handwritten paper tell a chilling story. A ransom note. Kidnappers have taken her baby girl and they want money. Not $1 million. Not some round, dramatic figure you'd expect from people targeting one of Boulder's wealthiest families. No, they want exactly $118,000. Oddly specific. Strangely precise. And here's the thing that makes your stomach drop. That number matches John Ramsey's recent bonus from Access Graphics almost to the dollar. How would strangers know that? How would kidnappers who broke into a house in the dead of night have access to private financial information about a corporate bonus? Police officer Rick French pulls up to the Ramsey mansion at 5:59 a.m. 7 minutes. That's how long it took for law enforcement to respond. He rushes inside, reads the ransom note, and begins a systematic search of the massive 15-room house. Every bedroom. Every closet. Every corner. He makes his way to the basement, that maze of storage rooms and odd spaces. He opens the door to a small wine cellar, peers into the darkness, sees nothing obvious, and moves on. Just another empty room in a house full of them. But here's what Officer Rick French will carry with him for the rest of his life. JonBenét Ramsey was already in that room. Already dead. Already lying on the cold concrete floor just feet from where he stood. He was that close. 8 hours pass. The ransom note promised a phone call between 8 and 10 in the morning with instructions for delivering the money. The call never comes. No kidnappers make contact. No demands are issued. Nothing. By early afternoon, Detective Linda Arndt suggests that John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White do another sweep of the house. Just to be thorough. Just to see if they missed anything. At 1:05 p.m., John Ramsey opens that wine cellar door again. This time, he turns on the light. His scream echoes through the entire mansion. There, covered with a white blanket, is his daughter. John rips the duct tape from her mouth and scoops her lifeless body into his arms. He carries her upstairs, past the Christmas tree they decorated together, past the presents she opened just yesterday morning, and lays her on the floor. JonBenét Ramsey wasn't kidnapped. She never left the house. She was murdered right there, in her own home, while her family slept just floors above. The ransom note was a lie. But whose lie was it? Who spent time in that house writing page after page of theatrical demands while a 6-year-old girl lay dead in the basement? And why would someone stage an elaborate kidnapping when the victim was never meant to leave? Before we go any further, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we're about to dive deep into one of the most controversial cases in American history. The evidence we're going to examine will challenge everything you think you know about this case. Every single detail matters, and you won't want to miss what comes next. John Ramsey wasn't just wealthy. He was the embodiment of the American dream. Born in Michigan, Navy veteran, master's degree in business, he climbed the corporate ladder with relentless determination. By 1996, he was founder and CEO of Access Graphics, a computer services company that had just crossed $1 billion in revenue. $1 billion. He lived in a 15-room Tudor mansion in Boulder's exclusive University Hill neighborhood, worth over $700,000. He had everything: success, respect, money, influence. His wife Patsy was no less impressive. Patricia and Pa from Parkersburg, West Virginia, had worn the Miss West Virginia crown in 1977. Beautiful, poised, educated with a journalism degree from West Virginia University. She married John in 1980 and together they built what looked like the perfect family. 2 children, Burke, 9 years old, and JonBenét, 6. And JonBenét was following directly in her mother's footsteps, competing in child beauty pageants since she was 4 years old. Crown after crown. Title after title. Blonde curls, stage presence, a smile that seemed to captivate everyone. But here's where the perfect image starts to crack. The morning after JonBenét's body was discovered, the Ramseys didn't just cooperate with police. They hired lawyers. Immediately. They controlled their media appearances with precision. They gave carefully calculated interviews, speaking directly to cameras, proclaiming innocence before anyone had even accused them of anything. John appeared too calm, too controlled. Patsy seemed theatrical, almost performative in her grief. Investigators noticed. The public noticed. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments because this case divided not just Boulder, but the entire country. Every city, every state had people arguing about what really happened in that mansion. The Ramseys looked perfect from the outside, wealthy, successful, beautiful. But what was really happening behind those closed doors? What kind of pressure was 6-year-old JonBenét under, performing in pageant after pageant, makeup and costumes and expectations? What kind of family dynamic existed in a house where a child could be murdered and a ransom note written without anyone hearing a sound? The perfect family image the Ramseys projected to the world was about to be examined, dissected, and questioned in ways they never imagined. 2.5 pages. That's how long the ransom note was. Most ransom notes are brief, direct, functional. A few lines. A demand. Instructions. Done. But whoever wrote this note had time. They had a lot of time. And they used every second of it to craft something that reads less like a kidnapping demand and more like a movie script. The note was written on a pad of paper taken from inside the Ramsey house. Patsy's notepad. The pen used to write it belonged to Patsy too. And here's the detail that should make your blood run cold. After writing this lengthy ransom note, whoever did it carefully placed the pen back where it belonged. The notepad was returned to its usual spot. Does that sound like a panicked intruder who just committed murder? Or does it sound like someone who lived there, someone who knew exactly where everything belonged, someone comfortable enough to tidy up before leaving? The note itself is bizarre. It starts with, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction." Foreign faction. Who talks like that? It goes on to demand exactly $118,000 in cash. Not $120,000. Not $100,000. Exactly $118,000. Investigators immediately recognized that number. It matched John Ramsey's recent bonus from Access Graphics almost perfectly. How would strangers know that specific amount? How would kidnappers breaking into a house at night have access to private corporate financial details? But the note doesn't stop at the ransom demand. It continues for page after page with threats, instructions, warnings. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. The language is theatrical, almost rehearsed. There are references to movies. "Don't try to grow a brain" is nearly identical to a line from the film Speed. The note explicitly mentions Dirty Harry. Whoever wrote this was educated, literate, someone who consumed media and could reference it casually. Then there's the handwriting analysis. Multiple experts examined the note and came to frustratingly different conclusions. Some experts said Patsy Ramsey could not be ruled out as the author. They pointed to specific letter formations, the way certain words were styled, the overall presentation. Other experts said definitively that the handwriting did not match Patsy's known samples. John's handwriting was generally ruled out by most analysts. The writing appeared to have what they called feminine characteristics, though that's hardly scientific or definitive. What time is it there right now? Seriously, drop the time in the comments because I want you to think about this. Imagine it's 2 in the morning. You've just committed murder. Would you sit down and write a 2.5-page ransom note? Would you take the time to craft movie references and theatrical threats? Or would you get out of that house as fast as possible? Here's what makes absolutely no sense about this ransom note. JonBenét's body was in the basement. If you're staging a kidnapping, you remove the victim. You take the body away from the crime scene. That's the entire point of a kidnapping scenario. But JonBenét never left the house. She was found in the wine cellar, just feet from where her family slept. So why write a ransom note at all? Why create this elaborate fiction about foreign factions and attaché cases and phone calls that would never come? Unless the ransom note wasn't about kidnapping. Unless it was about buying time, creating confusion, redirecting investigators away from what actually happened inside that house on Christmas night. Unless the note was written by someone who needed the story to be about strangers breaking in, not about what really occurred within those walls. The autopsy of JonBenét Ramsey was performed on December 27, 1996, by Dr. John Meyer of the Boulder County Coroner's Office. What he found painted a picture that completely contradicted the kidnapping narrative. This wasn't a quick crime. This wasn't a panicked intruder grabbing a child and fleeing. This was something far more calculated, far more disturbing, and far more personal. Cause of death: asphyxiation by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. In simpler terms, JonBenét died from being strangled with a garrote while suffering from a massive head injury. The skull fracture was severe, an 8.5-inch linear crack that indicated tremendous force. Something heavy struck her head with enough power to split her skull and cause significant brain swelling. Investigators suspected a flashlight, possibly the one found on the Ramsey kitchen counter that morning. The blow would have rendered her unconscious immediately. But here's where the timeline becomes crucial and deeply troubling. The medical examiner estimated JonBenét died sometime between 10 p.m. on December 25 and 2 a.m. on December 26. Read that again. She was already dead or dying when Patsy Ramsey found that ransom note at 5:30 in the morning. The entire kidnapping scenario was a fiction from the moment police arrived. There were no kidnappers waiting by the phone. There was no chance of getting JonBenét back alive. She had been gone for hours, lying in that cold basement room while a ransom note sat on the staircase promising her safe return. The garrote itself tells a story of deliberation. It wasn't a rope or cord brought by an intruder. It was fashioned from materials found inside the house. Specifically, it was made using a paintbrush from Patsy Ramsey's art supplies in the basement. Someone took the time to break that paintbrush, tie cord around it, and create a tightening device. This wasn't a crime of passion or panic. Someone waited while JonBenét lay unconscious from the head injury. Someone had time to construct a weapon, to fashion a garrote, to use it with enough force to leave deep marks in her neck. Duct tape covered her mouth. White cord was loosely tied around her wrists, positioned above her head. But here's what forensic experts noted: the wrist bindings weren't tight. They weren't functional restraints. They looked more like staging, like someone's idea of what a bound victim should look like rather than actual restraints meant to control a struggling child. Everything about the scene suggested someone creating an image, crafting a narrative, making it look like something it wasn't. Then there's the evidence that nobody wants to talk about but can't be ignored. The autopsy noted vaginal trauma. The findings were complex and became one of the most controversial aspects of the entire case. Some experts believed the evidence indicated chronic abuse, a history of trauma that predated the night of the murder. Other experts vehemently disagreed, attributing the findings to normal anatomical variations or improper wiping. The interpretation of this evidence had profound implications. If there was prior abuse, it suggested something terrible happening in that house long before Christmas night. If there wasn't, it meant something horrific occurred during the murder itself. And then there's the pineapple. Undigested pineapple was found in JonBenét's digestive system during the autopsy. This detail seems minor until you realize what it means. A bowl of pineapple was found on the Ramsey kitchen table that morning. The bowl had fingerprints on it, Burke's fingerprints and Patsy's fingerprints. But when investigators asked John and Patsy about it, both parents stated they did not give JonBenét pineapple after returning home from the Christmas party. They said she fell asleep in the car, John carried her to bed, Patsy changed her into pajamas, and everyone went to sleep. No mention of pineapple. No memory of a late-night snack. So when did JonBenét eat that pineapple? Who gave it to her? Why would both parents deny something so simple and innocent unless the truth of that moment revealed something they couldn't afford to admit? The pineapple sits there in the evidence file, undigested, undeniable, a small detail that blows apart the official timeline. Someone is lying. The question is, what else are they lying about, and why does a bowl of fruit matter so much that it has to be erased from the story? Officer Rick French will never forget December 26, 1996. At 6:15 a.m., he stood at the door of the wine cellar in the Ramsey basement. He opened it, peered inside, saw darkness, and made a decision. He didn't flip the light switch. He didn't step inside. He closed the door and moved on. JonBenét Ramsey's body was lying on the floor just feet away from where he stood. That single decision haunted him for the rest of his career. But that was just the first mistake in what would become a masterclass in how not to handle a crime scene. Within an hour of police arrival, the Ramsey house started filling with people. John made phone calls. Patsy made phone calls. Friends arrived, Fleet and Priscilla White, John and Barbara Fernie. A victim advocate sent by police showed up. People walked through rooms, sat on furniture, used bathrooms, touched surfaces. The potential crime scene was being contaminated by the minute, and nobody stopped it. Detective Linda Arndt was left essentially alone to manage what was supposed to be a kidnapping investigation. She was outnumbered, overwhelmed, and watching evidence integrity disappear before her eyes. The Boulder Police Department failed to properly secure the scene. They failed to control who entered and exited. They failed to preserve crucial evidence. These weren't small mistakes. These were fundamental failures of basic police procedure. Then came the moment that destroyed any remaining chance of forensic clarity. At 1 p.m., Detective Arndt suggested John Ramsey and Fleet White search the house again. When John found JonBenét's body in the wine cellar, he didn't leave her there. He didn't call for police. He picked her up, ripped the duct tape from her mouth, and carried her upstairs. He laid her on the hallway floor near the Christmas tree. Patsy collapsed over her daughter's body, sobbing, draping herself across the crime scene. Every protocol was violated. The body was moved. Evidence was touched, contaminated, destroyed. Investigators would later try to analyze fiber evidence, DNA evidence, trace materials, but how do you separate what matters from what was introduced by the dozen people who walked through that house? How do you build a prosecutable case when the crime scene was compromised within hours of discovery? You can't. The mistakes made that morning didn't just make solving the case harder, they made it nearly impossible. And some people wonder if that was incompetence or something far more calculated. September 1998. A grand jury convened in Boulder, Colorado, to hear evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey case. For over a year, they met in secret. Witnesses testified. Forensic experts presented findings. Documents were examined. Evidence was scrutinized. 23 citizens listened to everything the public never heard, the details too sensitive for media coverage, the testimony too crucial to risk contamination, the evidence that would determine whether anyone should be charged with the murder of a 6-year-old girl. Grand juries don't determine guilt or innocence. They don't conduct trials. Their job is simpler: decide if there's probable cause to believe a crime was committed and that specific people should be charged. It's a lower standard than beyond a reasonable doubt. It only requires enough evidence to justify moving forward with prosecution. And in October 1999, after 13 months of deliberation, the grand jury voted. On October 13, 1999, District Attorney Alex Hunter held a press conference. He stood before cameras and microphones and delivered shocking news. He would not be filing charges against anyone in the JonBenét Ramsey case. He thanked the grand jury for their service and explained there was insufficient evidence to move forward. The case, he implied, had reached a dead end. The Ramseys were not charged. The investigation stalled. The public was left confused and frustrated. But Alex Hunter lied. Not about the charges, those truly weren't filed. But about what the grand jury actually decided. For 14 years, that lie stood. The truth remained sealed in court documents, hidden from public view, protected by legal protocols. Until 2013, when a reporter's lawsuit forced those documents to be unsealed. What emerged changed everything the public thought they knew about the grand jury's conclusion. The grand jury had voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey. Not for murder directly, but for child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. The indictment stated that John and Patsy did unlawfully, knowingly, recklessly and feloniously permit a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation which posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in the death of JonBenét Ramsey. It also charged them with rendering assistance to a person with intent to hinder the discovery, apprehension, and prosecution of someone who committed a crime. Read those charges carefully. The grand jury believed something criminal happened involving the Ramseys. They believed the parents either caused JonBenét's death through abuse or neglect, or they helped someone else cover up the crime. 23 citizens who heard all the evidence, who saw everything investigators collected, who listened to expert testimony the public never accessed, they concluded the Ramseys were criminally responsible. But DA Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictments. Without his signature, they were meaningless pieces of paper. Hunter later explained his decision. He didn't believe he could prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt in court. The evidence was suspicious, yes, but not conclusive. The crime scene was contaminated. The investigation was flawed. A high-profile trial against wealthy defendants with excellent attorneys could fail spectacularly, and a loss would mean no one could ever be charged again due to double jeopardy protections. So he made the call not to prosecute. What's the weather like where you are today? I'm asking because I want you to really sit with this for a moment. A grand jury heard everything, absolutely everything, and voted to indict. But the DA refused. Does that mean the evidence wasn't strong enough, or does it mean the system failed? You decide. Burke Ramsey was 9 years old on Christmas night 1996. According to his parents, he was asleep when JonBenét was murdered. He heard nothing. He knew nothing. He woke up to chaos and confusion, his sister gone, his house filled with police and strangers. For years, Burke remained mostly invisible in the investigation, a child witness protected from media scrutiny and public examination. But as the case dragged on unsolved, attention slowly shifted toward the one person nobody wanted to suspect, JonBenét's brother. The theory that emerged was devastating in its implications. It suggested that on Christmas night, something happened between Burke and JonBenét. Maybe sibling rivalry. Maybe jealousy over attention, over pageants, over the way their parents focused so intensely on JonBenét's competitions and appearances. Maybe an argument over a toy, over the pineapple on the kitchen table, over something that seems trivial until it escalates. The theory proposes that Burke struck JonBenét with something heavy, possibly the flashlight found on the kitchen counter. The blow fractured her skull, rendering her unconscious. And then came the unthinkable decision. Instead of calling 911, instead of rushing their daughter to a hospital where she might have been saved, John and Patsy made a choice to protect their son. They couldn't lose both children. They couldn't risk Burke being taken away, investigated, institutionalized, branded as a killer at 9 years old. So they staged everything. They created the garrote to obscure the real cause of death. They wrote the ransom note to redirect investigators toward a fictional intruder. They hid JonBenét's body in the basement, planning perhaps to move it later, to complete the kidnapping fiction. But police stayed longer than expected, forcing John to discover the body when Detective Arndt suggested another search. This theory explains the insider knowledge in the ransom note, the exact bonus amount, the familiarity with the house layout, the comfort level to spend time writing and staging. It explains the lack of forced entry, the use of Patsy's materials, the odd behavioral responses from both parents. It explains why they immediately hired lawyers, controlled media access, and seemed more focused on defending themselves than cooperating with investigators trying to find their daughter's killer. Burke was interviewed multiple times by police and child psychologists. His interviews were analyzed extensively. He appeared unusually calm, almost detached when discussing his sister's death. Some experts said this was normal. Children process trauma differently, often through avoidance and emotional distance. Other experts found his demeanor disturbing, his answers evasive, his entire effect inconsistent with a child who'd lost his sister to a brutal murder. Burke's DNA was tested and compared against the unknown male DNA found on JonBenét. It didn't match. That should have cleared him completely, except those who believe in the Burke theory argue the DNA is irrelevant, manufacturing contamination, innocent transfer, a red herring that has nothing to do with what actually happened that night. For most of his life, Burke avoided public attention completely. He graduated college, worked in technical fields, lived quietly away from the spotlight that consumed his childhood. But in 2016, CBS aired a documentary called The Case of JonBenét Ramsey that laid out the Burke theory in explicit detail. Investigators and experts appeared on camera, walking through the evidence, presenting their conclusion that Burke was involved and his parents covered it up. Burke sued CBS for $750 million for defamation. The case eventually settled in 2019 for an undisclosed amount. He also sued a forensic pathologist who made similar claims. That case settled as well. And then Burke did something unexpected. He gave his first public interview to Dr. Phil McGraw in September 2016. Over 3 episodes, Burke discussed the case, his memories of that night, the decades of suspicion. But the interview didn't help his cause. He smiled at inappropriate moments. He gave awkward answers. He seemed disconnected, almost robotic in his responses. Some viewers saw guilt. Others saw a socially awkward man thrust into an impossible situation, dealing with trauma in his own way. Burke maintained absolute innocence. He said he was asleep. He knew nothing. An intruder killed his sister. When forensic scientists examined JonBenét Ramsey's body and clothing, they found something that would become the most controversial piece of evidence in the entire case. Unknown male DNA. It was discovered in the crotch area of JonBenét's underwear, a mixed profile, but containing genetic material from a male who wasn't John Ramsey, wasn't Burke Ramsey, wasn't anyone in the family. The profile was entered into CODIS, the FBI's DNA database. No matches. An unknown male had left genetic material on the underwear of a murdered 6-year-old girl. In 2003, the Bode Technology Group developed a more complete profile using newer DNA techniques. Then in 2008, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation used cutting-edge touch DNA analysis on the long underwear JonBenét was wearing when her body was found. They discovered something significant. The same unknown male DNA profile from the underwear also appeared on the long johns. Same person. 2 different pieces of clothing. 2 different locations on her body. For many people, this was the smoking gun. This was proof of an intruder. How else would the same unknown male DNA end up in two places unless that person had direct contact with JonBenét during or after the murder? On July 9, 2008, Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey took an extraordinary step. She wrote a formal letter to John Ramsey, officially apologizing to him and his entire family. She stated that new DNA evidence had convinced her office the Ramseys were not involved. She formally exonerated John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey. For John, it was vindication. But it came too late for Patsy, who had died of ovarian cancer in 2006. But not everyone accepted the exoneration. The Boulder Police Department never agreed with DA Lacey's conclusion. They took back control of the investigation in 2009 and made it clear they still viewed the case from multiple angles. Why? Because touch DNA is incredibly sensitive technology. It can detect genetic material from the briefest contact, a handshake, touching an object, even secondary transfer. The underwear was brand new, purchased from a package. Factory workers, packaging employees, warehouse workers, store employees, any of them could have left trace DNA. John Ramsey, now 80 years old, demands genetic genealogy testing like the technology that caught the Golden State Killer. He believes it could finally identify the unknown male whose DNA was found on JonBenét. Boulder police remain resistant, claiming the DNA might not be sufficient quality or that resources are limited. Is the DNA proof of an intruder or innocent contamination? 28 years later, we still don't know which. John Ramsey has never wavered. For 28 years, he has told the exact same story. An intruder entered his home on Christmas night and murdered his daughter. He was asleep. He woke to Patsy's screams. He read the ransom note. His daughter was missing. Then, hours later, he found her body in the basement wine cellar. That's his account. It hasn't changed. Not once. Not in police interviews, not in depositions, not in media appearances, not in documentaries. The same narrative, the same details, the same unwavering consistency. He's done everything a man proclaiming innocence could possibly do. He submitted to police questioning. He provided DNA samples. He took polygraph tests administered by experts, tests he claims he passed. He hired attorneys, yes, but innocent people facing false accusations hire attorneys too. He participated in countless interviews over nearly 3 decades. He appeared in documentaries in 2016, 2017, 2022, and most recently in 2024, always making the same case, always pointing to the same evidence, always demanding the same thing, advanced DNA testing that could finally identify his daughter's real killer. After Patsy died in 2006, John could have disappeared. He could have lived quietly, avoided media, refused to engage. Instead, he remarried in 2011 to fashion designer Jan Rousseau and continued fighting publicly. He pushed for genetic genealogy testing. He called for outside agencies to take over the investigation. He offered to pay for private DNA analysis. He criticized the Boulder Police Department for what he views as tunnel vision, an unwillingness to pursue evidence that contradicts their theory of family guilt. Is this the behavior of an innocent man? A father wrongly accused, watching his family destroyed by false suspicion, determined to clear his name and find justice for his daughter? Or is this something else entirely, a performance so committed, so consistent, so carefully maintained that it has become indistinguishable from truth? Investigators who interacted with John on December 26 noted his demeanor. He seemed too calm, too controlled while Patsy fell apart. He appeared analytical rather than emotional, focused rather than panicked. Some saw this as suspicious. Others argued that people process trauma differently, some collapse, others go into problem-solving mode. There's no correct way to react when your child is murdered. But here's what divides opinion about John Ramsey more than anything else. He hired public relations professionals. He managed media appearances strategically. He and Patsy gave interviews to CNN just 6 days after JonBenét's death, looking directly into cameras, making statements, controlling the narrative. Most parents in their situation would hide, grieve privately, refuse all media contact. The Ramseys did the opposite. They defended themselves publicly before formal accusations were even made. Some people see this as proof of innocence. A righteous refusal to accept being railroaded by incompetent investigators. A man with nothing to hide standing up and saying, "We didn't do this, and we won't be silent while you try to destroy us." Others see it as manipulation, an attempt to sway public opinion, to create reasonable doubt in potential jurors' minds before a trial could even occur, to control a story that was spinning dangerously out of control. John Ramsey is now 80 years old. He has spent more than half his life under this shadow. If he's hiding something, he has maintained that deception with superhuman discipline. If he's telling the truth, he has endured something almost unimaginable, losing his daughter to murder, losing his wife to cancer, watching his son accused of killing his sister, and being suspected himself by much of America for nearly 3 decades. Either way, John Ramsey's story is one of the most analyzed, scrutinized, and debated narratives in true crime history. 28 years. No arrests. No charges. No convictions. No justice. JonBenét Ramsey would be 34 years old today. She might have graduated college, built a career, started a family of her own. Instead, she's frozen forever at 6 years old, blonde curls, pageant crown, a bright smile captured in photographs that have been analyzed and scrutinized by millions. A little girl who never got the chance to grow up. 3 theories. Each one supported by evidence. Each one contradicted by other evidence. Theory 1, the parents staged everything after something terrible happened in that house, creating an elaborate kidnapping fiction to cover their tracks. Theory 2, Burke struck his sister, and his parents made an unspeakable decision to protect their son. Theory 3. An unknown intruder entered the home, murdered JonBenét, and left DNA behind that has never been matched. A grand jury heard all the evidence in secret and voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey. But the district attorney refused to sign those indictments, claiming the case couldn't be proven beyond reasonable doubt. In 2008, a different DA officially exonerated the entire family based on DNA evidence. Yet the Boulder Police Department never accepted that exoneration and continues investigating the case with the family still under consideration. DNA that either proves everything or means nothing. A ransom note that makes no sense unless it was written by someone inside the house. A crime scene so contaminated that meaningful forensic analysis became nearly impossible. Behavioral observations interpreted as either grief or guilt depending on who's watching. Pineapple that places JonBenét awake and eating when her parents said she was asleep. A skull fracture and garrote that suggests something far more calculated than a moment of rage. The evidence has been examined by investigators, forensic experts, documentarians, journalists, amateur detectives, and true crime enthusiasts for nearly 3 decades. Everyone looks at the same facts and reaches different conclusions. Some are absolutely convinced the Ramseys are guilty. Others are equally certain an intruder committed this crime. The case has become a Rorschach test. What you see reveals more about your assumptions than about the truth itself. What was John Ramsey really hiding for 28 years? Maybe nothing. Maybe he's exactly what he claims to be, an innocent man destroyed by suspicion, fighting for justice while the real killer walks free. Maybe the DNA will eventually lead to that person through genetic genealogy, vindicating John completely and finally giving JonBenét the justice she deserves. Or maybe John Ramsey has been hiding everything. Maybe he knows exactly what happened in that house on Christmas night. Maybe he and Patsy made a decision that required decades of deception, and he's carried that burden ever since. Maybe the truth died with Patsy in 2006, and John will take it to his grave. The answer is out there. It's in that ransom note. It's in the DNA. It's in the timeline, the evidence, the contradictions, the things that don't quite fit the official narrative. The truth isn't hidden, it's been in front of us the entire time. We just can't agree on what it means. And that's the real tragedy of the JonBenét Ramsey case. Not just that a 6-year-old girl was murdered. Not just that no one has ever been held accountable. But that 28 years later, with all the evidence laid out, all the investigations conducted, all the experts weighing in, we still don't know. We may never know. And JonBenét Patricia Ramsey deserves better than that. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Subscribe to the Case Files Collective for more deep dives into cases that deserve to be examined with the detail and respect they demand. Hit that like button if this investigation made you think differently about the case. And drop your final thoughts in the comments. After everything you've heard, what do you believe happened? Family involvement or intruder? The conversation matters. These cases deserve to be discussed honestly. And the truth, whatever it is, deserves to finally come to light.